Fair enough. My name is Reza Rahman. I am in my day job principal program manager for Java on Azure. I work with a number of folks that are key contributors to the Jakarta EE ecosystem in my day job, namely Red Hat, IBM, and Oracle, to essentially enable their Jakarta EE story on Azure. That's a big part of my day job. Outside of my day job, I've been involved in the enterprise Java ecosystem for a very long time, almost 20 years now. And I'm also proud to say I'm part of the founding members of what was back in the day Java EE Guardians, and today is the Jakarta EE Ambassadors. So I am involved in the Jakarta EE community in a number of different ways. And I think that how I'm involved is also going to continue to evolve as we move forward, I think in a positive direction, is my suspicion. So I've been involved in Java EE, Jakarta EE for almost 15 years now, primarily actually as an individual contributor to the specifications. I've been essentially involved since EE5 as an observer and more as a contributor and expert group member in Java EE6, Java EE7, Java EE8. And these days I continue to be a community contributor. So I primarily my contribution these days is through the Jakarta EE Ambassadors. So I'm a project lead for Eclipse Cargo Tracker, which is a key project under the EE4J umbrella. I would say, a key contributor to the Jakarta Starter these days as well, and various other projects like that. And of course, I do a whole bunch of blogging and tweeting, and in general, I stay informed and try to share my opinion and perspective from a community standpoint with pretty much all of the Jakarta EE specifications. Going forward, there may actually be a formal role for me as a sort of Microsoft representation into the Jakarta EE process. Jakarta EE10 is an incredibly important release. I definitely don't want to minimize the releases that have already happened, namely Jakarta EE8, Jakarta EE9, and Jakarta EE 9.1. But I think, as many of us know, those releases are more about decoupling Jakarta EE from Java EE and from the JCP, and those are the releases that were required to make that process really successful. Namely, Jakarta EE8 being the proof in the pudding that it can be done. In fact, the technology has been transferred to the Eclipse Foundation. That was what Jakarta EE8 was about. And Jakarta EE9 and 9.1 was a bit of the modernization and alignment with Java SE that was needed. But more importantly, decoupling from the Jakarta namespace. That was the reason for being for Jakarta EE9 and 9.1. Now, while these are important things to do and essential things to do in order to move the platform forward, they didn't really actually come with any sort of innovations. For the average Java developer that's not intimately involved in the transition process, it's sort of a know-all, right? They don't really derive much direct value in terms of changes or innovations from these releases. Jakarta EE10 is basically something that is not the same thing, right? In the sense that there are in fact API changes that were being made that are going to be delivered as part of Jakarta EE10. So foundationally, that's important for that reason, is that there's a long pending set of changes that if you are a Jakarta EE, somebody that relies on Jakarta EE as a technology, you haven't really had in the past few years, and that is about to change with Jakarta EE10 and hopefully going forward. And more importantly, that can also be done. It's also sort of proof in the pudding that the Jakarta EE process can also continue to deliver features and innovations the same way that Java EE had done for some period of time. Pretty much all of the changes that are going into EE10 are much needed, right? So they're and much belated. I don't think there's a single feature you can take a look at and say, oh, maybe that was not that important, right? That's not the case. So these are all important stuff that a lot of people have been waiting for a long time. It's very difficult to pick favorites. For me, standardizing on CDI and sort of leaving behind the old legacy of EJB is a very important one. So from that perspective, I would say that some of the changes in things like the Jakarta concurrency API, so things like the at asynchronous annotation, that allows you to further, sort of not need to use AJB anymore. We've had at transactional in JTA since E8, and now, now that we have things like at asynchronous, I'm hoping that more and more of those EJB-like features move into the component specifications where they really belong. So for that reason, I'd say that changes in Jakarta concurrency are the most exciting for me. But honestly, there's a lot of other good stuff and a lot of other important pending changes in Jakarta E10. So in the Jakarta EE ambassadors, we sat down and asked ourselves these very questions. So if you go into the Jakarta EE ambassadors website, there's a very prominent Jakarta E10 contribution guide, which we will shortly revise after the release of Jakarta E10. We're going to revise the document and make that a Jakarta E11 contribution guide. And that isn't the heart of that document. Is really talks about, okay, what are the long pending changes that are necessary to move the platform forward. So there is definitely a few that are top of mind for me. They're again more or less along the lines of modernizing the platform and sort of making it possible to use the platform without EJB at all. These would be the other annotations that are in EJB today. So moving at schedule annotation into potentially Jakarta concurrency, moving away from message-driven beans and creating a more modern model for consuming JMS messages, ideally in the messaging API, something like at message listener that we've been talking about for a while in the community. Things like moving the at run as and rows allowed annotation and making those consumable in CDI via the Jakarta Security API. Jakarta Security in E10 is going to standardize OIDC, which is very good. OpenID Connect. I think very similarly, another missing piece there is what's in microprofile JWT today. I think that could very easily be more better refined and moved into Jakarta Security. On the flip side, very similarly, I think a very important gap, and a long-standing gap that's addressed in microprofile today, but not really in Jakarta EE, is configuration. So I'm looking forward to the configuration API being standardized as part of Jakarta. I'm hoping that's going to happen in Jakarta E11 and also begin to consume those changes in configuration. That's almost the more important part. So APIs like Jakarta Persistence, for example, being able to do those configurations in sort of a name value properties file as opposed to absolutely requiring a persistence.xml file. And I should mention, I think in Jakarta E10, one of the key things that's important to a lot of people is probably the core profile. And I think another important change is, begin to, other than simply being a subset of the larger standard, which is necessary, right, to support all these new runtimes like Quarkus and the like. I'm hoping that becomes a more robust delivery mechanism to make sort of Jakarta EE at least perceived to be more cloud native. I believe it already is very cloud native, but enhancing the core profile is another way of sort of signaling that yes, this is a technology very much ready for the cloud. Yes, so this is a question I've asked the end user community at least, and even the Jakarta EE ambassadors. We've discussed this at length, and we definitely have a very definitive opinion on this. We believe that once a year release is what is required to have the Jakarta EE platform be perceived as moving forward and as progressive and modern. Anything more than that, it's not really practical. Given some of the scale of changes and features that often go into something like Jakarta EE and the level of consensus that's required, 6 months would be too little to make those changes happen. And besides, one of the things that perhaps is a matter of opinion, but I don't know that anything less than a year is even consumable by developers. You can see that in play in Java SE releases. Often those very rapid releases are not even taken up. It's really the LTS releases that people wind up adapting. So anything more than 1 year, I think it's perceived as too slow. in an ecosystem where there's open source projects that have 6-month releases. Anything more than a year makes Jakarta EE look slower by comparison. So I think 1 year is just about the right balance. It's not too much and it's not too little. My closing remarks really is, I have to say, one of the points of concern from the Jakarta EE ambassadors has been more community contribution. So obviously moving to the Eclipse Foundation was important in terms of greater vendor neutrality, and largely we wound up preserving the same set of stakeholders more or less. And certainly in the Java EE history, there was one predominant player. It was either Sun or Oracle. I think now it is more balanced. If you look at the net contributions in Jakarta EE, it's obvious that it is much more multi-vendor, not simply in principle, but also in practice. I think what we were also hoping, though, as part of the Eclipse Foundation transition, is more individual contributions. So frankly, people like myself that had been individual contributors in the JCP for a very long time. We were hoping, I think, even as Jakarta EE ambassadors, for more of that. Right? So for more individual contributions to occur, other than simply big corporate stakeholders. I think that has not really been realized as of yet, right? There's a few folks like Otavio Santana and you could name, so if you were to name some names, Otavio Santana, Arjun, Timms, these are the people that are significant individual contributors, but we need far more of those, right? We don't need like just a handful, 3 to 5 such people. I think we need dozens of such people, and that's what I would hope would happen after Jakarta EE is out the door and we get to our regular cadence where this becomes something that is under real active development. That's, I think, going to be the real accelerator to innovation.